What's so different about your literary work is you started off with 9 different sort of characters and points of view, and then you expanded that to 35. How do you do that?
Yeah, there are days I wonder if I bit off more than I can chew, and where I sit around telling myself, did it really have to be 7 kingdoms? Why couldn't I have been, 5 kingdoms? 5 kingdoms would have been a lot, but having thrown the balls in the air, I do feel compelled to keep on juggling them. Yes, I use the point of view structure in the books is a very limited third-person point of view. So each chapter is seen from through the eyes of a particular point of view character, and you hear his thoughts or her thoughts. You see the things they see. You hear the things they hear. So unless one of my point of view characters is present at a particular event or conversation or battle, you can only hear about it secondhand, or you can only hear rumors of it that might be distorted. That's been the structure, really, of most of my writing. When I was a younger writer back in the 70s, I experimented with other things like omniscient point of view or first person. But I settled on this, which I think is most effective, this tight viewpoint structure, third person. And I think it's the best way to tell a story, because that's the way all of us perceive the story. We each look out through our own eyes. We can only hear what we're hearing, and we're not God to switch between them. I've never found the omniscient point of view persuasive. But with a big story, you need multiple points of view. I mean, I'm writing the equivalent of a medieval World War II. So, let's say I was doing a World War II novel. How do you write a novel about World War II? Whose viewpoint do you use? Do you use Hitler's point of view? Do you use Franklin Roosevelt's point of view? You can't tell the story of World War II from any single point of view. You need all of those points of view intercutting between them to assemble a mosaic that comes close to telling the entire story. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Except the difference being that in World War II, there have been literally tens of thousands of historians who have collected all those points of view. With King's Landing, it's just you.
Well,
how do you keep it straight? How do you remember and be able to adjust and reflect the points of view and the personalities in so many different ways?
I have glibly said in some interviews with increasing difficulty, but that's not far from the truth. It is big. I have charts, I have genealogies, I have maps, I have various files. I refresh myself. I'm aided by the fact that I think my brain is wired differently than a normal person's. I seem to use the brain synapses that normal people use for real people for my fictional characters. So I forget real people instantly. I will remember some guy who appeared briefly in a book that I wrote 12 years ago.
For people who are not familiar with your work, this series takes place in an imaginary world. There's a struggle for control of the kingdom. This dynastic war is essentially one of 3 main plot lines. There's the other plot line involving the others, these sort of superhuman characters. And then there's the exiled Targaryen daughter who seeks the return of her ancient throne. Why those 3 main plot lines?
Well, of course, the 2 outlying ones, the things that are going north of the wall, and Daenerys Targaryen on the other continent with her dragons are of course the ice and fire of the title, A Song of Ice and Fire. The central stuff, the stuff that's happening in the middle, in King's Landing, the capital of the 7 kingdoms, is much more based on historical events, historical fiction. It's loosely drawn from the Wars of the Roses and some of the other conflicts around the 100 Years' War, although of course with a fantasy twist. One of the dynamics I started with there was the sense of people being so consumed by their petty struggles for power within the 7 kingdoms, within King's Landing. Who's going to be king, who's going to be on the small council, who's going to determine the policies, that they're blind to the much greater and more dangerous threats that are happening far away on the periphery of their kingdoms. And of course, you can see that all through history. It's a common dynamic that takes place in history. The Greek city-states before the birth of Christ, fighting with each other, squabbling with each other, even as Philip of Macedon built up his armies to conquer them all. But you even see it in modern times, the political struggles in the France under the Third Republic, while the Nazi threat is rising. But the French politicians would almost rather befriend the Nazis than each other. And maybe there are lessons in modern day, too. Who knows? I mean, we have things going on in our world right now, like climate change, that's ultimately a threat to the entire world. But people using it as a political football instead of, you'd think everybody would get together. This is something that can wipe out possibly the human race. So I wanted to do an analog, not specifically to the modern day thing, but as a general thing with the structure of the book.